Today we are going to discuss a very basic concept from services marketing called the gap model of service quality. Before we begin understanding the gap model, if anybody has confusion about the word service quality, please feel free to check the link below. So let's begin. As you can see, I have drawn a few things already. The gap model is divided into two parts. The first part you can write here, this is the customer part, and the second part is marketeer. The area above this line is the customer section, and the area below this line is the marketeer section. I'll explain this further as I move along. There is one customer gap and there are four provider gaps. This is gap number 1, gap number 2, gap number 3, and gap number 4. So let's begin with the first gap. Here you have to understand the words customer expectations and the words customer perception. In some places you might also find the words expected service and perceived service. Now this gap between what the customer expectation is and customer perception is forms the customer gap. Now let's understand this gap. What do you mean by customer expectations? Customer expectations are standards and reference points which a customer brings into the service environment. These expectations of a customer can be formed by several reasons. Reasons can be advertising, reasons can be word of mouth, it can also be shaped by personal needs. Now, if we try to understand customer perceptions, these are actual service assessments when a customer is experiencing a service. So, imagine a situation where a customer has walked into a restaurant. Before walking into the restaurant, the customer has seen ads and has booked the restaurant. The customer has some expectations which he has formed with the help of marketeer control factors. When the customer is actually sitting there in the restaurant, eating food in the physical ambience, interacting with the employees, the customer is forming perceptions, which are the reference standards, which are standards which the customer sees there in the restaurant. When the customer sees a gap between what the customer was expecting and what the customer got, I'll repeat again, what the customer was expecting and what the customer actually got, the gap is formed. The customer gap forms. So this gap is fueled by four other gaps which are called the provider gaps. Now the first gap which we have to understand, which is the provider gap number 1, is this. So it is formed between customer expectations and here we are going to write management perception of customer expectation. So how does the management understand what the customer wants? So here customer expectations are there and here management tries to understand what the customer wants. This can be done through market research. This can be done through taking customer feedback. Most of the companies sometimes fail to conduct a good marketing research. Most of the companies fail to understand this customer expectation. When this happens, a sort of gap is formed which is called the listening gap. Let me write this again. Okay. So the management fails to listen to the customer in order to understand what the customer wants. So this is the listening gap. Next gap is the service design and standards gap. I'm just going to write it here. Service design and standards gap. Here also we are going to write service design and standards. So these design elements and standards should be customer driven. Management should first understand what the customer wants and then tries to form the service environment in the way in which the customer wants. So these can be elements of physical evidence, these can be elements of servicescape. So in very common words, you can say that the customer sees in terms of ambience, chairs, tables, lighting, coloring, food quality, time, waiting time, all these things which the customer wants. The management has to understand this and make the changes in the service environment according to the customer. So these service design and standard gaps should be formed according to customer needs and requirements. So if the management understands what customer expects from my service, management will be able to do a very good work in terms of designing these standards. Still, many companies fail to do so. Many companies fail to design the service environment in such a way in which the customer wants. Management has to do some changes in the service environment to cater to these needs of the customer in terms of standards. This can be a customer thinking about the waiting time between my ordering of the food and the food arriving on my table is 15 minutes. Management has to do things so that the food is available in 15 minutes when the customer is waiting in the restaurant. So these can happen because of a lot of things like poor service design, absence of customer defined standards, inappropriate physical evidence, or servicescape. The next gap which we have to understand is service delivery. So imagine a situation where a management understood what a customer wants, developed the services in a way which is reflecting customer standards, and then the people in the organization deliver the service properly. But if the employees in the service organization fail to deliver this service, this gap occurs. This can be very simply called as service performance gap. So the company or the service firm fails to perform the service. There are two elements here. One aspect is the employee in the organization, in the other aspect is customers. Both employees and customers have to fulfill their jobs, roles and responsibilities very carefully in order to ensure that the service performance gap does not occur. The next gap is here. Here the words which we have to remember are external communication. So before the customer has walked in, customer might have seen ads as we discussed here. So how is the company trying to communicate to its target audience? Through ads, social media, word of mouth. Imagine a situation where a salesperson talks to a client and the salesperson overpromises things. It will set false expectations. Imagine a service firm where there is lack of integrated marketing communication. In very simple terms, you can understand that the communication from the firm is not adequate enough. It is creating false hopes. It's misleading customers. This gap is called the external communication gap. So here we have gap number 1, gap number 2, gap number 3, and gap number 4. So there is 1, 2, 3, and 4 gaps which are called as the provider gaps. Let me just write it here again. These 4 are called the provider gaps, and you have 1 customer gap. this customer gap. This is the gap model of service quality. I hope this video was helpful, and if you liked it, please like, share and subscribe. And please let us know in the comment section if you need any further videos like this. Thank you.